All right, in this video, we're going to be going over the eye model. And so this eye model has had the eyelids, so the palpebrae, superior and inferior palpebrae removed, as well as it does not include any of the lacrimal apparatus, but it does include some of the extrinsic eye muscles. And so we're going to kind of start from the outside and work our way in. And so the outside here, this is going to be the outer fibrous tunic of the eye, and the white part that you can see here is all going to be the sclera. So all this area is the sclera over here. The other part of the outer fibrous tunic of the eye is the cornea. And you can see the cornea right here. It's the clear layer that's going to be covering the iris and the pupil. And so when light comes through, light is going to go through the cornea, or be refracted through the cornea and then enter the eye. So the two parts of the outer fibrous tunic of the eye are going to be the sclera, which is this white fibrous part that gives the eye its sort of toughness and its shape, and then we also have the cornea, which is this clear part here. Now attached to the sclera, as part of the outer fibrous tunic of the eye, are going to be the extrinsic eye muscles. So let's look at them through here. So as we're looking here, the first thing to figure out is our directions. So obviously the top here is going to be superior, the bottom is inferior, but the sides are a little bit harder. So what we can do is we can look at this little attachment right here. So this is going to be attaching to the superior oblique, and this is going to sort of angle towards the trochlea. And so the trochlea is like a little pulley-like area, and the trochlea is located in the medial, like near your nose. So the area, like the trochlea, is on the medial side, and so this is pointing towards medial. So we know that this is the medial side, and this is going to be the lateral side. All right, so knowing our directions, then we can name our muscles. So we have 6 extrinsic eye muscles. 4 of them are the rectus muscles. And rectus means straight, so like our rectus abdominis, and they go straight from their attachment on the cornea. They kind of go straight back. And so our rectus muscles are going to be named by their direction and orientation and where they're going. And so on the top here, we have the superior rectus. On the bottom, we have the inferior rectus. On the lateral side, we have the lateral rectus. And on the medial side, we've got the medial rectus. All right, so the other 2 extrinsic eye muscles we have that connect directly to the eyeball are going to be the superior and inferior oblique. Remember, oblique is something that instead of going straight, it kind of goes at an angle. And so both of these are going to be angled muscles. So this is the superior area. So obviously we're going to find the superior oblique up here. So this is going to be like the tendon of the superior oblique over here. And so it's going to be going up here, and it goes around the trochlea, and then the superior oblique itself is going to kind of go back. And then on the inferior aspect of the eye, we have got, so this part right here, that one that goes straight back is the inferior rectus, and this one that goes back at an angle, right, we can see that it's not straight, it's angled. This is going to be the inferior oblique eyeball. So right here is going to be the optic nerve exiting the back of the eyeball. All right, so now let's remove this top outer fibrous layer. So now we can see the interior aspect of the eye. All right, so this part of the eye here is going to be the middle or vascular tunic. And it's called the vascular tunic because there are lots of blood vessels, and we can kind of see that, right? So you can see all of these blood vessels here. And so the vascular tunic is made up of 3 things. It's made of the iris, which is the colored part of the eye, the ciliary body, which we can see better on the inside. I'll show you when I open this up. And then the choroid. And so here we have the front part, this colored part of the eye, is going to be the iris. And the iris has a hole in the middle. And this hole in the middle of the iris is called the pupil. And the iris is very important because the hole in the middle of the iris, the pupil, can actually constrict or dilate to control the amount of light that enters the eye. And so the light is going to go through the cornea, where it gets refracted, and then it has to go through the pupil before it hits the lens, which you can kind of see shining back there. So the pupil is really important because, as I said, it can dilate or open to allow more light in the eye, or it can constrict or close to allow less light in the eye. So that's the iris. Now let's look at the choroid over here. The choroid is going to be a thick layer of blood vessels, and these blood vessels are going to, they kind of lay up against the retina, and they nourish the retina. So this part all over here is going to be the choroid, right? So we've got that. Let's move this out of the way. So the iris here And then this part in the back, this whole back part is the choroid, and here we can see the optic nerve again is kind of sticking out of the back. Now let's open this up too. All right, and so back here. When we open this up, we can now see the different layers. So this outside here, this is going to be the iris, the ciliary body is here, and then the choroid is here. So if we turn it this way, we can see that the ciliary body is actually going to be this area here, and so it comes in and it sort of has this projection on the interior aspect of the eye. So the ciliary body is going to be made up of the ciliary processes and the ciliary muscles. And these are actually going to connect up to the lens, and we can kind of see this little lens over here, and it would sit in here, and you can see how the ciliary processes over here, and the ciliary muscles specifically are going to attach to the lens, and they're actually attached by something called suspensory ligaments, and those are going to be not shown on this model. But so this, the ciliary body is important. It does two things. The ciliary muscles, are going to be attached to the lens by those suspensory ligaments, and that is going to help control the shape of the lens, which is going to help us focus on things close to us versus far away. And then the ciliary processes are actually going to be important in the creation of aqueous humor. And aqueous humor is the fluid that's going to fill the anterior portion of the eye. So now that we see this, we can see that this interior part here, this is going to be the neural layer, and this whole area is the retina. So this outside is the choroid, and this inside area is the retina. And then this guy right here is called the ora serrata, which is going to be like this scalloped edge in between the neural retina and the non-pigmented area. So here we have the retina, and we can see that this is going to be the optic nerve exiting out, and so this part right here that's labeled 14 is going to be the optic disc, and the optic disc is also called the blind spot. And so this is the area where the ganglion cells leave and become the optic nerve, and because of that we don't have any photoreceptors here. So the optic disc is also known as the blind spot. Now if we look over here a little bit lateral to the optic disc 13, it's hard to see. The color is not that much different, but this is going to be the macula lutea, and the fovea, in the middle of that is the fovea centralis. And so the macula lutea and the fovea centralis, and it's a little bit easier to see this on an actual image of the back of the retina. But this fovea centralis is the area where we have the majority of cones, and this is where when the light comes in the eye, comes in through the eye, and we focus it directly, especially when we're reading or seeing something that's very like in focus, the light comes in the eye and then it's focused directly on that fovea centralis, which is in the middle of the macula lutea. And then these guys are just retinal blood vessels, and you don't really need to name them or anything like that, just know this is the retina. And then remember that the retinal blood vessels are also going to exit with the ganglion cells at the optic disc. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about the different areas and the different chambers of the eye and the different fluids that are within them. All right, so if we look here, we can see that this, let's get our bearings again, this is going to be the cornea and the sclera out here. Then, so that's the outer fibrous tunic. This is going to be the middle vascular tunic on the outside and the inner neural tunic here. And then everything on here, this is going to be stuff that's inside the eye. So this is going to be the lens. Then this here is going to, this represents the vitreous humor, which is like the jelly-like fluid in the back of the eye. And so in between the cornea and the lens, this is called the anterior cavity. And in between the lens and the retina, this is called the posterior cavity. So the posterior cavity is full of this vitreous humor, and this is going to be this like a gel-like substance that's created during development of the embryo, and it stays. It doesn't get recycled or reused, it's just the same. And as it ages, it can get a little bit sort of more stringy. Whereas in the anterior cavity, we have the aqueous humor, and there's not like a part of this model to represent it. It's just the open space would be filled with aqueous humor, which is like a watery fluid that fills, gives shape to the anterior cavity of the eye. The anterior cavity also has two segments and two different areas. Flip this over and see. So we have the anterior chamber of the anterior cavity, which is in between the cornea and the iris. And this is the part that you can actually see It's going to be like the outer part. Like if you look into your friend's eyes, you'll see the iris, and from the cornea to the iris, and or your eyes in the mirror, you will see the anterior chamber. And so that's going to be the anterior chamber of the anterior cavity. And then in between the iris and the lens here, this is going to be the posterior chamber of the anterior cavity. So the terminology can be a little bit confusing, but the aqueous fluid, the aqueous humor is going to be the fluid that is going to be within the anterior cavity, which includes the anterior chamber and the posterior chamber. And so the aqueous humor is created in the ciliary processes here, and it kind of goes into the posterior chamber, and then it goes through the pupil and then into the anterior chamber. And then eventually it's reabsorbed at the scleral venous sinuses over here down at the limbus. And the limbus is the area that's right between, it's like where the cornea meets the sclera, which is called the limbus. And I don't think you need to know that, but if you go into ophtho, it might be a good term to know.